Hi, it's Vicki Stanley. This is another rendition of It's About Time. I'm going to take my headphones off. Cover story was about the Pope. I already told you that if you go online, you can see his address to Congress and find out what he had to say. It was very interesting. So here we go. I don't think I have as much to share this week, but here we go on this verbatim page. Viola Davis won an Emmy. First African American to do so. She said, "The only thing that separates women of color from anyone else is opportunity," and I believe that. Ben Carson, who's a Republican presidential candidate, had made the statement, "I would not advocate that we put a Muslim in charge of this nation." And I just remember how that when I was younger, no one wanted a Catholic in office when John F. Kennedy was running, but sometimes we have to change. And of course, a lot of this has to do with people still thinking that Obama's a Muslim, and the sad part is, even if he was, who cares? But he's been associated with Christianity his whole life, and it just seems strange that people are making this an issue at this time. 96% of former NFL players tested positive for brain disease in a new study. Football has done a lot of damage. People love their game, but sometimes they forget that a lot of safety still needs to be introduced into this sport. We're losing a lot of men and the wisdom that they could offer us because they're being destroyed. Their heads, their brains are being destroyed. The Iranian president, Hassan Rouhani, said, "The slogan, 'Death to America,' is not chanted as against the American people, but it means they just object to American policies. They don't want to kill Americans. They just object to their policies." And I did read a book once. I cannot remember the name of the author right now, but he had been well, he went over and did articles. He was a journalist overseas, and he had been told by many people in Afghanistan and Pakistan and other places that death to America is mistaken by us. I know it sounds horrible, and it sounds like I'm all for these people that say that, but I'm not. But a lot of times people say that out of anger because they want to be noticed. It's like a child saying, "I hate you," to their parents, but they really don't. They just want some attention. And I think that the Middle East and a lot of people over there have felt like that they haven't received the proper attention because of the fact that United States and other countries have had a historic policy of supporting people in power that really should not have been there and that were hurting their own people. Volkswagen purposefully built millions of cars that could cheat on regulators' emissions tests. This is a real problem, and it has hurt their image. They cheated by installing a defeat device that overrode software so that it would look like the engine was performing at the right parameters when it wasn't. It had a detect test. It was able to surmise when a car was being tested and to flip over into a different program. Alter emissions. The defeat device then switched the vehicle's emission system to dyno calibration, lowering the emissions to comply with the EPA, and then when it was all over, it switched back. Now about the environment, I'm sorry for blurring the screen for a minute. About the environment, Democrat presidential front-runner Hillary Clinton came out against the Keystone XL pipeline on September 22nd, siding with environmentalists and liberal groups on the pipeline intent to link Canadian oil sands crude with the Gulf of Mexico. Now, we're either going green or we're not. We either have climate change or we don't. And furthering coal and oil resources just isn't going to work for me. We need to become all solar or nuclear or wind-powered or hydro-powered by 2050. That's just a fact. And then, of course, President Xi Jinping of China arrived in the U.S. on September 22nd for a 7-day trip, which included a state dinner at the White House. There's still simmering tensions between the U.S. and China over cybersecurity, and China, of course, still denies it. Which U.S. states take in the most refugees? Well, Texas, California, Michigan, New York, Florida, and Arizona. They are taking in not only refugees that normally come in, they're coming from Burma, Iraq, from Iran, and of course the Arab American communities in Dearborn, Michigan fully welcome more Arab Americans. Somalia and Burma, Cuban exiles into Florida, and of course Arizona is probably more of the Hispanics. President Obama nominated Eric Fanning, an openly gay man, to be Secretary of the Army. If he's confirmed by the Senate, the former top advisor to Defense Secretary Ash Carter would be the first openly gay civilian to lead a branch of the military. I personally do not have a problem with that. I'm sure there are those who do. But it's time that we allowed people to be who they are and not judge them. God is the judge. Drug price hikes. Now this is what really gets to me. Pills that used to cost $13.50 now cost $750. The New York-based Turing Pharmaceuticals recently caught flat for buying an old medication and dramatically raising its price. Other kinds have gone from 4 cents to $3.70, 11 cents to $4.34, $6.50 to $127.70. There's a scam right there. The U.S. war against ISIS is going nowhere. That's really all I have to say about that. We need a change. And I did hear a broadcast by President Obama about us continuing our support with Iraq, and that Iraq is doing more and more, and we are going to continue our support into 2016 in helping them to build up their men and women that are serving in the armies to fight off the ISIS and the other terrorists. But we're just not getting the job done with ISIS, and it needs to happen. And hopefully, when Hillary becomes president, if it hasn't happened by then, she'll take care of that. Jackie Collins, the sister of Joan Collins, has passed away. She was involved in other things differently than her sister, and she was a writer. Not as well known, but will be certainly missed. Scott Walker, Wisconsin's governor, has withdrawn from the Republican race. And the song Happy Birthday to You has been ruled by a judge to be a public domain because someone had, the ruling invalidated copyright first filed in 1935 by Clayton F. Summy Company. The decision means that Warner Chappell Music, which acquired that as a successor, can no longer collect the royalties. I mean, come on, that song's been around a long time. It's about time it was free to the public. Daniel Thompson, 94, who invented the automated bagel-making machine, bringing the one-time ethnic food to the masses, has passed away. He also invented the folding ping-pong table on wheels. Yogi Berra has gone. He's passed away. I think I was a little confused on Facebook the other day because people were quoting him, and I wondered why these quotes were so special, because they sounded kind of weird to me. But he's been having little street wisdoms and quotes all his life, and some of them people say weren't even his, but they were attributed to him. One of them being, it ain't over till it's over. And of course for him, it's over here but not in eternity. And it says the future ain't what it used to be. All of us older people know that for sure. There's been a struggle over in Jerusalem about the holy place. There's a little bit of argument about where the Holy Mount is, and also the special place for the Muslims, which is there in Jerusalem. And this is something that I hope that can be worked out peacefully, because this is how it needs to be done. America is burning. This year alone, from Alaska to California, some 9 million acres have gone up in flames, destroying hundreds of homes and claiming at least 10 lives. All told, this wildfire season is on track to be one of the worst in U.S. history, thanks in part to climate change and drought. Now, nature protects itself from incineration. As branches and brush accumulate on the forest floor, they're periodically burned off in natural fires, often sparked by lightning. Unlike mega blazes, these surface flames clear debris, but typically don't consume trees, which limits the fire's size and spread. So that's another thing about climate change. We need to realize it's happening and something needs to be done about it. There was a little article here that said the hidden cost of helping others, and I thought about pastors and evangelists and doctors. Ambivalence toward do-gooders also arises out of a deep uncertainty about how we ought to live. To most people, it's obvious that we owe far more to family than to strangers, but do-gooders challenge that idea. If everyone's family is loved by someone, they reason, why shouldn't we help other families as we would help our own? I believe that do unto others as you would have them do unto you, the golden rule, it's practiced by pretty much every religion. But one of the things I have found in my lifetime, almost 61 years now, is that a lot of times people in service to others neglect their own families. And I'm telling you, there's something that my grandchildren say when they go to football practice, if I've gotten this right. If it's not good enough for the game, you know, it doesn't matter on the court if it doesn't matter at home. And the thing is, if we can't keep our home in order and have the kind of life at home as evangelists and pastors and teachers and all the other religious leaders that lead other people, we need to put our families first and set an example. I've seen a lot of young people lost to the world that weren't taken care of because their parents were busy taking care of a church. Order up. Why your fast food is about to come even faster. Well, there's all kinds of things happening, which you might have seen on the TVs, where you can just put a little emoticon, I think it's called, of a little pizza, and Domino's delivers your favorite pizza. That's all you got to do is just Send them the little picture and it's already online. So big chains like Applebee's are bringing tech to the table by setting up tables to handle orders and payments for customers. We're talking about adding new jobs, but there may not be any jobs for anybody if the computer world takes over everything. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar says, American students and politicians need to stop waging war on reason. Recently, a freshman at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill wrote an article criticizing a literature of 9/11 course for requiring reading that sympathizes with terrorists. The student hadn't taken the class nor read the actual work, but relied on his personal research to form his conclusions. The attack on education isn't on training our youth for whatever careers they choose. It's on teaching them to think logically in order to form opinions based on facts rather than on familial and social influences. This part of one's education is about finding out who you are. It's about becoming a happier person. It's about being a responsible citizen. If you end up with all the same opinions you had before, then at least you can be confident that they are good ones because you fairly examined all the options, not because you were too lazy or scared to question them. But you, all of us, need the process. Otherwise, you're basically a zombie who wants to eat brains because you don't want anyone else to think either. A lot of churches and church people, when I was growing up, did not want their children going to college. They said college would change them into worldly people that weren't righteous anymore. What college has done for me is help me reevaluate the things I was taught. Because just because you're going to church doesn't mean that the people in charge of that church are teaching you the truth from the scriptures. They might be teaching, just like the young man said, their own personal research, that they formed their own conclusions, and they don't value anybody else's. And you cannot come to an agreement in this world, in the neighborhood, in churches, and even in homes until we decide to listen to the other side, to allow for the discussion. And then if we still feel the same way, that's fine, but don't alienate the other people. Because what if we get to heaven and we're wrong? Won't we want God's mercy for us? I think this is back about the same thing. This is still Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He says, were he alive today, would Buckley say that after reading a 2014 poll by Alex Theodoros of the University of California, Merced, in which 54% of Republicans polled think President Obama is a Muslim deep down, 10% of Democrats and 25% of independents agreed, yet Obama has always been publicly affiliated with Christianity, and there is not one fact to suggest he's a Muslim. In fact, if you have read his book, you would find out that there was a time in church where he walked down the aisle and gave his heart to Jesus. Now, if you want people to accept your testimony, then you need to accept the testimony of other Christians. And he's one of them. Since when did we stop requiring our political leaders to educate themselves on issues before deciding the best course? Instead, we demand they hold a course regardless of facts. Embracing reason is an uphill battle for humans. Almost 400 years ago, philosopher Francis Bacon wrote, "The human understanding, when it has once adopted an opinion, draws all things else to support and agree with it, and though there be a greater number and weight of instances to be found on the other side, yet these it either neglects and despises." They prepare or prefer emotional rhetoric to reasoned argumentation. That's a good sentence. The people that fight each other about just silliness sometimes. They're students that are not reading the work and just sticking with what they've always been told. They prefer emotional rhetoric to reasoned argumentation. The joy of college is arguing with others who are equally passionate and informed, but disagree. It develops empathy for others and humility in yourself, because you now will look upon your opponents not as evildoers or idiots, but as good people who want the same thing as you, a safe, loving, moral community. This is the problem with a lot of politicians. They want the same things, they just want them in a different way, but instead of joining hands and making it work and trying to get along, people do this in families. You know, we shouldn't be against one another. We should be supporting one another. And of course, the Pope came to America, and I like these pictures. He met with Fidel Castro, and of course he met with Barack Obama, and we all know that he was very vital in helping this happen, this renegotiation of diplomacy. This article is about John Kasich. It says John Kasich isn't angry. He's a Republican and I'm not. But when you do something, when you make a promise and then you don't fulfill that promise, people don't forget. Now, he might have made it all the way up to be Ohio's governor, but there's a group of people that he distrust him, and I'm surprised that he became governor, and I would hope that he'd never be president, because I remember one time years ago when he had promised, he made a promise to a group, to an LGBT group, that he would appear at a festival, and he let them know at the very last minute, long after he'd already decided not to show up. And I think there were a lot of very disappointed people, and people that would no longer trust him. There's a man who used a spy video camera to infiltrate Planned Parenthood, and this is probably the first time that I've had a little problem. I know I've looked at the charts, and I realize that abortion is supposedly a very, very, very small part of what Planned Parenthood does, but the recordings, contrary to what some people have stated, which this is a sad thing that happens, people say that there's all kinds of pictures of horrible things. Well, the videos don't show those things. The recordings don't prove Delayden's claim that Planned Parenthood profits from the sale of fetal body parts, but the sight of top officials appearing to debate the costs of organs over wine exposed a market many Americans found unsettling, if not repugnant. Maybe we need to readdress the Planned Parenthood and what the money's really going for. We're being told that the money being used is just for the services rendered. But it says here, they tried to entrap people into saying things, Supporta says, and then selectively edit videos to inflame anti-choice sentiments. Now, I believe this happens on both sides of the aisle, both sides of the dispute. And if we can't use honesty, I believe that less children would be aborted if people without religious intentions would simply sit down with women and explain things to them and help them to make decisions and allow them to make decisions. There would be less abortions, because there's so much more involved than just what happens immediately at that moment. I just think there's not enough dialogue and too much criticism. Well, it looks like this is a short version this week of It's About Time. It's talking about the October 5th issue. I was a little behind, and I have one more to catch up with, and then I'll be on top of things. So for now, I'm saying goodbye. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you in a couple of days.